Over the last couple of years, I've had a certain conversation with a lot of people, and this conversation always revolves around oppression, segregation, and racism, specifically towards black people, African Americans, and Africans. I'm going to try my best to separate these two groups of people because I believe they're very two different groups of people. When it comes to African Americans or Black Americans, a lot of people do not want to be called African Americans. We'll get into that a little bit later. When it comes to Black Americans, there's a certain conversation that keeps going around, and I've seen it a couple of times. I've debated it with a few people a couple of times. I've seen people debate about it online a couple of times, many times. When it comes to Black Americans, there is a specific argument. I think I even saw Candace Owens talk about it. And the debate or the argument is that Black Americans need to get over the fact that they were oppressed systematically for over 400 years or for 500 years ago. They need to get over that. And they need to learn from other minority groups who have almost been into the same position and learn to move forward. Now, these arguments, I find them very interesting to me because when I look at them, I say, okay, fair enough. That's it is a solid argument. It really is, because if we do not learn and, move away from the past, it's probably doomed to repeat itself. Right? So the arguments sound all well and good. But then you look at what about today? Because there are places in America, there are places around the world where people of a dark skin color are still being mistreated. When you look at some places in America, every day you would come across a story where, a person of a dark skin color has been mistreated. Not so long ago, the Black Lives Matter movement was triggered again into motion. For those who do not understand, or for those who do not know, the Black Lives Matter movement did not start with George Floyd or Breonna Taylor. May their souls rest in peace. Now, when it comes to George Floyd, a lot of people have also come out to point out how he was a criminal and that he was actually resisting arrest, which brings in a question of, are criminals less human than anybody else? And then fine, let's put George Floyd on the side and bring out Breonna Taylor, who was actually a civil servant. She was, serving the community she was living in. She was working for the government. Officers broke into her house, shot her dead. How about a young man who was jogging one morning and got shot down by, a couple of white dudes? So, yes, the arguments of, black people in America should move away from the fact that, they were oppressed systematically for over 400, 500 years ago, and learn from it and see how to evolve and, unite and fight the system and move on. The argument is all well, and it might even be from, a good place. But then you have to ask yourself, what about what's happening today? What we do? What are we going to do about that? I said I was going to try and separate Africans from Black Americans. I'm going to try and not call them African Americans because a lot of people don't want to be called African Americans, and I get them. If you've been living to a place for more than 10 years, you're not even the first one of that generation. You're like a third generation, or even a fourth, or even a fifth. 500 years is a long time ago. If you went back 500 years ago, I don't think any of us would survive. I know I wouldn't. If I went back 500 years ago, I wouldn't survive. So, when it comes to Africans, I've had so many times arguments that Africa should stop complaining that colonialism is what still stops and hinders its development today, but it is the people. Now, that is also another interesting argument for me, because as an African, a lot of people have been pissed off when I say I'm 100% African when they ask me where I come from, and I say I'm from Africa. You can be pissed all you want. You can be confused all you want, but it is a fact. I wasn't born anywhere outside of Africa. I was born inside Africa. I was born in the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo. So I am a pure blood. To put it in terms of fictional characters like vampires or werewolves, I'm a pure blood. My DNA might not be 100% African, but at least it would be 99.9999% African. So yes, I come from Africa. Specifically countries you want, that's not my issue. None of my problems. I know when I meet an African, I call them my brother, I call them my sisters. It doesn't matter where they come from, it doesn't matter their skin color. That is also something very important. Not all Africans are dark-skinned people. Egyptians, most of them don't look like they're from Egypt, which I guess gives them the idea that some Egyptians keep saying they're not Africans. People from the north, most of them don't have the same skin color as I have. Now, I am a little bit light-skinned black, but this is not about me. This is about an entire continent, and I am not going to speak for the entire continent. 54 sovereign countries, very large, the second largest continent on the planet. So, for the sake of Africans, just to get back to the point and back to the topic, Africans have been told to get over the fact that the people came into their homes, took their people, forced them to learn new languages, forced them to take on new cultures, forced them to take on new religions, forced them to adopt everything new from what they knew. Now, someone goes on and tells you, without colonialism, you people would still be wearing whatever you were wearing and still in the caves. I beg to differ. When you think of Egypt, which is until today still a mystery that credit has been given to aliens or superior beings, the pyramids of Giza, the Great Sphinx, these are still things that the world is still trying to decipher and understand. When you think of, there's so many things that are on the African continent that a human has still not understood, and credit is given somewhere else. Oh no, Africans could never have done this. Something superior might have come in and did this. So, when I think of this, and when I see the conversation that Africans should actually move away from being colonized for 500 years, being forced to give away their people and all that stuff, I ask myself, I actually tell myself and say, okay, cool. It is a solid argument. It is. I wouldn't dismiss it. It is a solid argument. But here's my issue. Neocolonialism. We have countries in Africa today, the 21st century, 2025, we still have countries that do not print their own money. And these are independent. I'm putting this in quote. These are independent countries, and yet for some reason they do not print their own money. A sovereign nation has its money printed somewhere else. That money does not have any value. That currency has zero value. Not in the market, not anywhere. We have nations where children today are being born and the only language they can speak is probably English, Portuguese, Spanish, French. So we have these countries today in the 21st century that has generations that don't even know their own cultures. When a white man came onto the continent of Africa and saw how people were worshipping and praying to the trees and the forest for rain, for food, for anything, he decided, no, they need Mary, they need Jesus, they need whatever they were worshipping on the other side of the seas. So when somebody says Africans should move on, Black Americans should move on, I say, fine, let's say they should move on, and they absolutely need to move on, because Africans and Black Americans are not the only people on the planet to ever been oppressed. We can all agree on that. Humans have always been trying to see who can be at the top of the other for so many years. You know, the pyramids were probably built with some of the slaves from Israel. If you read the book, the Bible, it tells you a bit of that. Who knows which other group of people was there? We don't know yet. But I always have an issue with these arguments, because these things didn't end. At least for Black people in America, at least for Africans. None of these things end. Countries that claim to have gotten independence from nations that oppress them, for some reason they still go and bow to the masters. Because a system was put in place 500 years ago to make sure that this person will always come back to me. There's a saying where I come from. You cannot teach someone how to fish and still give them fish. But what the masters did, they came in and gave Africans fish. They never taught them how to fish. I can tell you that there are nations on the African continent that still use curriculums for education that were written almost 100 years ago, 200. And you expect a nation to actually evolve when what they're using is centuries old? Many of the nations that came and conquered and left update their curriculums almost every year or every 2 years or even every 5 years, but they upgrade them, they update them. They keep on evolving. Now, thank God for the internet. Thank God for a connected world where there's information almost everywhere around you that you can get what you need. All well said and done. But then you still go back to Africa where the internet is super slow. The data that you have to spend on, Googling a few things on Wikipedia or just to surf the internet costs a lot. The gigabytes you have to use, they're expensive. So you look at all these things, you hear the argument, you say, yes, we have to move on. The Jews moved on. As much as they do not forget, and they keep reminding the world and teaching the world how to unite, they didn't forget, you know. I also think they didn't move on because generations until today they still talk about it, how horrible it was, you know. This argument goes back. Every time I'm having these arguments, I go back to also a conversation about whether or not uh, places that still have, things from the past, if they should be abolished. Should the slavery subject be abolished in schools in America? The statues, should they be torn down? Like Churchill, he has statues across different places. Should those statues be torn down? A few people will tell you, no, people need to learn who that person was, so let them stand. And other people will tell you, no, they have to go. They're a reminder of terrible, terrible things. And both sides are right. Both point of views are right. So for me, it's not that these arguments don't make sense. It's that, what about what's happening today? What about the police brutality against black people in America? What about countries still invading other countries today just to show who has more firepower? So as much as we would like to move away from the past is still existing in the present and probably in the future. So what do we do? To me, I ask myself these questions and I can't even seem to come up with an answer, because at the end of the day, if America creates a superior weapon, someone else is going to want to recreate that and make it even bigger. But if a smaller nation wants to survive that fight, they have to look at somebody who has a bigger gun. There's a quote I saw in a movie once where someone was saying, if somebody pulls out a gun, you pull out a bigger gun. So, yes, it might be time to move away from that, learn from it, unite, and conquer maybe. But it's happening now, today, in the 21st century. It's still happening. 500 years ago, it happened in a very extreme way. Today, it's happening in a very concealed way. It's very subtle. It's very quiet. It's being done, quietly behind locked doors and all that stuff. I'll give you an example. This might be my last episode ever or not. The CIA was responsible for the murdering of then the first Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Patrice Emery Lumumba. The CIA was responsible. The CIA is a United States of America government agency. So today in 2025, President Trump sits with representatives from Rwanda and DRC to broker up a deal that would end a conflict that's been happening for the last 30 years. A conflict that they actually helped create, or they helped keep in place. Because without them removing Lumumba, that conflict would have never happened. They triggered a chain of events that has led to so many people, a generation or two or even three, that have not been living into their home. And that is DRC. The Obama administration was responsible for killing the then Libyan president, Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, triggering a chain of events that would end up leaving Libya in the state that it is in right now. The man had a vision of uniting Africa under one ruler, the way you see the United States of America. One president, one currency, one passport, one identity. That was something that threatened the world. The USA especially. Maybe France and the UK as well. Belgium as well. Who knows? These are not conspiracy theories. These are known facts. As much as they might want to deny them, it's out there. Just recently, I think in 2019 or a few years ago, Belgium handed back the tooth of Lumumba that they still had, because his body was put into acid and the only thing that was left was a tooth. Sorry. Yeah, English is not my first language. I might just mess it up anyway. So, yes, we want to move on. As an African, I would love to move on from that. I am tired of hearing of these stories about how our people were oppressed, put on boats. We've made jokes out of it. Black people can't swim. Black people don't like water and all that stuff. We would like to move on from that. I would like to move on from that. I would like my children to never hear about any of this. But it's happening today. So what do we do about what's happening today? What do we do? But I always go back to the same conclusion. There's absolutely nothing unless somebody comes up with a bigger gun. Or a bigger stick. Me as an African, I would go for a stick. It's put a lot of kids into shape. That's a topic for another time. But I think this is a conversation I'd love to have with you guys. Everyone listening in, I would love to hear your perspective on this. Do you think it's time for Black people in America to move on and Africans to move on? And if so, how? And also, how do we stop what's happening today? Because it's happening. We're not too ignorant to see that it's happening. In my previous episode, I talked about how President Trump was praising an African leader for speaking so good English and asking him where he went to school from. So, you can see it. It's right in front of us. But until next time, guys, we'll meet again. We'll talk it out.